morning, everybody. Your guest host here, interviewing another commissioner of the league. We had our first commissioner interview. You heard it there. Tim Shea thinks he's going to repeat. What are you going to do to take him down, Brandon? What are you looking for this year?
Tim's team name might be Trust the Process, but, truly at this point, I'm trusting my process. It's been a wild ride. It's been a wild 2 years. Started from the bottom, now we're here kind of thing. I'm just going to enjoy it, to be honest. It's going to be a fun year.
Love to hear it. Yeah, we've heard some spicy takes. Some people have you pretty high up this year, so it's a big turnaround for you. Let's start with the 2022 season, all the way from the off season of 2021 to now where we are here. Big transformation for your team. So walk us through your approach and what you hope to accomplish, and did you accomplish those things?
Yeah, I think for 2022, it was really just asset accumulation. However I could do it, however I could get those young guys, however I could get those draft picks. Anytime you're able to secure 15 first-round picks over 3 years, I think as far as rebuilds go, that's doing it right. I do feel like I accomplished that, and I think that led me to be able to build the team that I have now. What went right, that was the main stuff, just being able to get those assets. As far as what went wrong, to be honest, I acknowledged and I embraced the fact that I was completely tanking from the beginning. We got towards the end of the season last year, and it was, Sergey and I near the bottom. I owned both of our picks. So once that opportunity arose to be able to hopefully avoid toilet bowl punishments, I kind of went for that. And that worked out well. What went wrong? I think some lottery luck didn't go my way, kind of out of my control there. But again, with the assets I was able to accrue, I was able to make some trades that basically took that lottery luck and flipped it on its head. So everything kind of lined up for me. And I think I'm able to field the team that I was hoping I'd be able to field.
Well, Brandon, on this topic of the 2022 season and, like you said, start from the bottom, now you're here. Just for everyone, especially the new managers, just to give the history of the league, you entered the inaugural season, and I think the whole consensus was that you're certainly a playoff team, a top 2, top 3. And then at the conclusion of that season, even though you had a really strong roster and you could have certainly run it back again, you decided to trade for draft assets. And then, it led into the midseason for you where you had accrued enough that you were able to flip that for Jalen Hurts, which put you immediately into contention that we're seeing this year, especially with the draft picks that you're going to be having, like people like Bijan, for example. Talk us through that entire journey from the conclusion of that inaugural season to like what flipped that for you to get into this mode that was really shocking for the league as a whole. And then ultimately, I know even coming into this season, you were thinking about building for 2 years, 3 years.
Right.
And then trading for Jalen Hurts, sending, I think, 3 first rounds. So just help us, get into your head and peek into it a little bit.
I think I had a pretty good idea in my head that, I could be a playoff team in 2021, but I had no qualms about the fact that I was not in that contender tier. And I just wasn't content with that. I've been in too many redraft leagues where you're good enough, but you don't win. And I didn't want to be in that middling ground in a dynasty league where I was just getting, the 3rd or 4th or 5th rookie pick every year and not quite jumping into that next tier. So I think my strategy was just to sell the farm. I sold everyone. I sold anyone that moved that had any value. I took whatever value I could get for it. And I started off kind of slow. I think Austin Eckler was one of my first dipping my toe into the waters of rebuilding. But really, it came around when you approached me about Josh Allen, Tim. And, the assets that I could accrue through trading away Josh Allen, who I really didn't want to trade. I had no desire to do that. I felt like he could be a long-term member of my team, even if he had to survive a rebuild. But once, I started to think about those assets, think about what that could mean, think about the potential for, again, 15 first-round rookies over 3 years, that excited me. I was excited about the idea of, watching a lot of college football, which I did last year. But anyways, I think it switched once, I took 5 first-round picks last year, ended up trading, some of them. I traded away Treylon Burks pretty early into that. Saw some of them not perform how I expected them or wanted them to, like Sky Moore. There's a lot of risk associated with rookie picks. There's not a sure thing. And I know we've talked about that in other people's interviews as well. So that kind of scared me, the idea of all those first round picks on my roster not panning out and having, this whole rebuild kind of be with lottery tickets, as I called them, worried me a little. And I know last year when we had these interviews, I talked about how my 2024 picks would likely be trade bait, trying to fill out the roster to get those last few pieces. Once I got Jalen Hurts, that completely switched. I think, seeing the way he performed, I didn't want to have to wait another year to start to see, to reap some of those benefits. And I think the other thing that really shifted for me is seeing Eve kind of fall into the rebuild mode and seeing that I was one of the only people that had the assets to trade for a guy like Patrick Mahomes. We just, lined up as, I think it's the worst kept secret that he and I were going to figure out a way to make that trade. So once you do that, then it's kind of, I have Patrick Mahomes and I have Jalen Hurts. How am I going to make this into a championship level team? Getting back guys like Austin Eckler, it's not the sexiest thing. He's getting up there in age. We've seen with running backs this offseason how underappreciated they are in the NFL. But at the same time, you got to go for it when you have it. So we'll see how that all pans out.
And were those guys that you were targeting specifically, or do you just kind of know you have assets and are openly looking for any talent, or did you go seek those specific guys out?
I think this is kind of leading into the question I know that's coming later as far as my advice for our new dynasty managers, but being diligent and just seeing kind of the writing on the wall with other managers. You have to be as in tune with other people's rosters as you are with your own. And if you're not, that's when, trade talks start to get awkward and like you just don't go anywhere.
So you didn't go look for Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes just because you wanted those players. You looked at the rosters of those managers and thought there was something there.
Right, exactly. So once Sergey fell out of contention, I was motivated to get a Jalen Hurts because I didn't want to be in last place last year. I could have probably waited a little longer and not paid as much as I did. But I know that, he's 24 years old. So that's a guy I'm willing to pay up for. Patrick Mahomes never was on my radar for a guy I thought would be on my team. But once, Eve fell into that rebuilding mode, it was just available. Same thing with Austin Eckler. I see these guys pop up on the trade block and I try to fit them in, whether or not, whether that's something I see as a path now towards a championship. Same thing with Nick Chubb. There's been a lot of that this year where they'll just pop up. I see people are motivated to move them and I have the assets to do it. So I just assume do it.
So Brandon, that's a lot of good thoughts into, how it sort of transpired for you in just two off seasons, right? Like the inaugural season, you're, playoff, you had a really good chance to get into the championship. And then you decided to rebuild from there. And then you accelerated with the move of Jalen Hurts. So there's a lot of highlights for you in 2022 for sure that set up you really beautifully for 2023. So outside of your own team, what were some of the memorable things of the results or trades or moves that were, happening with the rest of the league in 2022 that you remember the most?
I think most of my focus has obviously shifted to kind of the off season. And I don't know if we've talked too much about that with other managers, but that's definitely, the seismic shift in our league from what we thought were perennial contenders 2 years ago to now full on rebuild. I mean, it's such a whiplash thing. Dynasty is like we've talked about, having a 2 to 3 year plan, even that might be too long of, trying to future forecast kind of your window because things shift so rapidly. Looking back at the season though, it's been mentioned before, but I think it's definitely important just given that, you won the championship. The George Kittle trade under the radar, something you've acknowledged you didn't think would move the needle, but totally did. I think that really showed me how much just one piece, not being complacent, it's really important. We had Kyle in the first half of the season just running through all of us. He was not to say he was complacent by any means, but I think other managers could have become complacent in the fact that like, hey, Kyle's just going to win it all this year. And, seeing you make the Kittle trade, you made huge trades, the JJ trade, things that have really set you up for the future. Those really stood out to me. Every year has been such a learning experience and like, who knows, my strategy could crash and burn. You never know. But I think for me, the biggest thing I wanted to do this offseason was lock in the quarterback position so that I don't have to hopefully think about it for years to come. As far as content goes, I'm pretty happy with my quarterback. But at the same time, seeing Dynasty, the price of these quarterbacks is astronomical. So the fact that I had to pay up immensely to get where I'm at now. So hopefully I get to reap the benefits of not having to pay up and use those assets on quarterbacks anymore. I can start to strengthen some of my other weak spots. I think that's kind of been my biggest takeaway from this offseason.
I want to get your thoughts on like how you approach the draft. So you obviously had a lot of picks last season. You obviously have a lot of picks this season. Like, just want to sort of get into Brandon Greenwood's head on managing Bills Mafia, how you're looking at rookies, and how you think about that draft pick asset class as a whole.
I mean, I love drafting. I think I said this last year when I played Madden. It's like my favorite thing is the draft. Forget everything else. So I'm always in asset accrual, whatever, video games I play or anything like that. I enjoy it. I enjoy the scouting piece. But what I found last year was that my draft ended up being pretty chalk. It was pretty much just, as far as the rookies went, you kind of fall into the hype train, which I did on like my Sky Moore pick. I fell into that off-season hype. But other than that, the other four were pretty much just the top four at the time where they fell. So that kind of worried me a little bit, just thinking about my future picks. Obviously, I've talked about it for years, how excited I have been about Bijan. So I do fall in love with players, and I'm not afraid to kind of figure out how to maneuver to get them. But the draft, it is like, you guys get paid millions to scout these players and they mess up. So the fact that trying to, me on YouTube and watching the occasional Texas football game, like, I need to trust kind of what the experts are saying, which takes a lot of it out of my hands. But I do enjoy it. I'm kind of upset about the fact that, I have a lot of picks in the future, but they're low picks. They're not, the exciting first rounders. But it did scare me. I got a little spooked, I think, this off season, early, even into the middle of last season. Trying to build a team off rookie picks it takes some balls and it definitely takes some patience. So I think that's the biggest thing with rookies is you have to be patient. I wasn't always the best at that. I traded away a lot of mine pretty early. I don't think I regret necessarily any of them. I think the trades all worked out pretty well, but a guy like Jahan Dotson, I traded him away to Sergey earlier this season and then had FOMO on that. So I ended up trading to get him back. Traded away Jamison Williams, which hurt quite a bit, but again, DK fits my timeline a little bit better. So I think you just have to be fluid. You can't get too stuck in any one strategy, and you have to just go where the league takes you. If Eve hadn't chosen to rebuild and Sergey had, snuck into the playoffs last year, I'm probably still sitting on those first round picks. So I think it just, you have to go wherever the other managers are at that point in time.
And staying on top of the topic of drafts, you've got 3 in the top 6 is what you have. So you're basically in control of the draft. Obviously, we know the quarterbacks are not going to your team, at least the 2 big names or the 3 big names, for example. How are you looking at the approach of the other players? Like, what do you think you need? How are you assessing that? You don't have to give the names of the players per se, but just like, how are you sort of thinking through that?
Well, first off, I mean, it was kind of breaking news to me that the 103 was kind of being shopped. So you never know. I might end up, and I wouldn't be opposed to taking, if someone jumps me for one of those position players. I value quarterbacks very highly, and I'm not opposed to taking one. But likely that's not going to be the case. I'm not going to have one of those big 3 quarterbacks. It's just best player available at this point, regardless of position. I don't enjoy running backs at all. They're what gives you gray hairs, I think, in Dynasty, because they're so hard to value year in and year out. But the way this draft falls this year, I think we've got 2 of them that are looking like studs in Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm not, I don't think it's any surprise that those 2 guys are probably at this point going to end up on my team. And then I'm a, Ohio State fan, so I've been pretty high on JSN for a while. Honestly, until like the pre-draft process, he kind of let me down a little, and then going to Seattle is kind of an iffy thing in itself. So I'm not 100% sold on that last pick. A little plug. I mean, if any top pick is available for me, that's the one right now that I wouldn't be opposed to dealing. I think there's some other good guys out there in Jordan Addison. I think he fell in a really good spot in Minnesota. I think he fits really well with JJ. And then Quentin Johnston as well. I mean, he also was feels like kind of a letdown in the pre-draft process, but tied to Justin Herbert. I mean, that guy can go up and get it. So there's some good talent out there. I'm not entirely sold on who I'm going to take with those the 105 and 106. But I think, being in the spot where I'm at and being able to take potentially the top 3 position players in this year's rookie draft feels pretty good, because I don't necessarily need a quarterback at this point. So
I think my tips to the new expansion managers is don't actually do any scouting. Just let Brandon do it for you.
Yeah.
Watch these interviews, and then
Yeah.
take his advice.
It's all like, if you're trying to outthink the experts, you're probably not going to be too successful. So, I mean, you look at any mock drafts, especially this year, there's not a whole lot of variance. It's tiered off pretty cleanly. I think after we get to pick like 7 and 8, it's going to get a little bit ugly or freaky. I don't know what the right word is. It's going to get weird. But before that, I think it's pretty standard who's going where. But as far as my team, if I'm able to add 2 running backs and a wide receiver, Bijan will slot in nicely in my starting lineup, push some of these guys, push Brandon Ayuk out of my starting lineup, and push some of the guys down. And then it's just house money at that point. If Jahmyr Gibbs can truly be top 10 starting this year, that'll look real good as a flex spot. And then just JSN as, extra ammo to kind of keep up with Tim.
So, Brandon, we've talked about your 2020 season, how you're thinking about the draft, this offseason in particular. How are you thinking about your 2023? You've obviously got a pretty strong roster. As you said, adding Bijan and Gibbs is going to really solidify your running back position for now, as well as the future, given that you've got Austin Eckler and Nick Chubb, and then whatever else J.K. Dobbins can do, which I think he's actually going to be, pretty well. So that's 5 startable, running backs right there for your flex. Receivers, other than Garrett Wilson and then maybe DK Metcalf, those are probably areas that you want to sort of improve, along with the fact that now the tight end spot is sort of addressed, right? With you getting Mark Andrews instead of TJ Hawkins they to roll with last year. How are you thinking about this season? Like, what are your goals? How are you thinking about your position upgrades? Like, all those things and your predictions for yourself for the season too.
So I'm not gonna like call myself the LA Rams, but it's pretty much championship or bust starting this year. I feel my window is fully open. So whatever moves need to be made to make that happen, I'm not afraid to do it, whether they're big or small. But at the same time, I'm not going to blow up, some of these core young guys that I've been able to accumulate. I'm not looking to trade my quarterbacks. I think that'll be a staple. It's just something that'll set me apart, hopefully, every year going forward for years to come. Last year, I don't want to lose as much as I did last year ever again. You come into these matchups and you're projected to lose by 50 something points. Like, it's not super fun. Although watching your rookies, watching your guys is whatever, that's fun. But I want to win. I want to put up some big numbers. I want to go for these records. I want my name on that trophy. So anything less than that this year will probably be considered a disappointment. I don't think I have the largest championship window. I think yours is definitely larger than mine as it stands, Tim. And even,
why do you think that is?
I think because I've gone heavy on my older running backs. Next year we could be looking at Austin Eckler and Nick Chubb both not having starting roles, and I don't think that would be that far out of the realm of possibilities for them. And I think that would set me back quite a bit to have those assets that are no longer worth anything. You have a lot of young guys that haven't reached their ceilings, that have those injury concerns, which scares me, as I'm sure it does you as well. But I would take a young guy with injury history early in his career. I think just given how medicine is today and how we've seen these guys, I'd take that over having these aging veterans going forward. Now, this year, I'd rather have my guys. I think having Nick Chubb, having Austin Eckler is much more comfortable than having a Swift or having an Etienne or having a Breece Hall coming off an injury. So I'll take that this year. Ideally, yes, I need to build on my wide receivers, but looking at how strong I am, at least this year, I don't think the running back position, I don't think there's a huge rush on that. I can kind of be patient and see what falls for me. I'm very high on like Ramondre Stevenson. I think getting him for Kenneth Walker, I'm very happy with that. Although I'm sure Ryan's happy with getting Kenneth Walker. So that's just an idea of kind of like the win-win trades that I think I could be making going forward. But I don't think I will be the most aggressive, or I don't think I'll be in the action as much as other people as the season progresses. I think, unless something goes horribly wrong for my team and I have to sell all over again. But Yeah, I don't know if that answered your question fully.
I mean, it does. I mean, the other thing too is you're going to be adding Bijan and Gibbs too. So you're going to be having Bijan, Gibbs, and then Ramondre as your three running backs. That's going to be great. It fits into the bucket that you're talking about in terms of they haven't even hit their peaks. Obviously, some of them are rookies that haven't even played a single snap in the NFL. I think the window for contention, and it goes back to like why we're so up on Ryan's team year in, year out. It's, I think in Dynasty, it's the receiver core, how deep that is, how top tier it is. And to your point, other than Garrett Wilson, and we're counting on Garrett Wilson to sort of have that CD Lamb jump that he had in years 2 to years 3 that he did. And hopefully Garrett Wilson is able to have this in the second year. But outside of that, like unless DK Metcalf is actually able to sort of show up in his promise like he did in sophomore year, that's probably where that's going to be tied to like your contending window, as you said. But you got enough picks, so hopefully you hit on a few, whether it's a JSN or Jordan Aston or whoever that's going to be able to get there.
I think I'm a little bit higher on DK too than I think is consensus. He's only 25. I think that gets overlooked a lot. It feels like he's been in the league forever. Tyler Lockett's going to retire in the coming years. So I think him and JSN could form a very formidable pair. You know, Gino's not going to be there forever. Hopefully he keeps it up this year, but Seattle will figure it out with quarterback. They always seem to. So I'm pretty high on that potential pairing. Brandon Ayuk too. I mean, he's no joke. He definitely proved that he can hold his own. There's so many mouths to feed in that offense. So I think his value is kind of tempered down a little bit, but as far as putting up fantasy points, I think in a pinch he can do it. I don't know that, you know, if he's my every week starter, I'm not going to win a championship, but filling into a flex spot, I think he can be a solid addition there. But yeah, wide receiver is absolutely an area that I'm going to have to find another stud because it's very hard to build around running backs in a dynasty league. They just do not hold their value. So yeah, to be able to prolong my window and stay in contention, it's going to have to come from those wide receivers. I've had tons of people trying to get Garrett Wilson from me. And I think in a win now trade, I could probably find a trade that would help me win this season. But I'm so hesitant to do it because going forward, if I lose Garrett Wilson, I really don't have much in that wide receiver room. So he's probably one that, you know, unless I get absolutely blown away, he's pretty close to untouchable, just given my other assets currently.
You can still keep trying for Devontae Smith. Maybe someday we'll find the value.
I'm trying. And see, that's the hard thing too. Mahomes doesn't have receivers to really stack. I mean, maybe Kadarius Toney breaks out this year. I doubt it, but yeah, I've been trying to get that Jalen Hurts stack. I know, Tim, I've gone after AJ Brown too. I'm not afraid to admit it, but yeah, it's always something I'm looking for, but it's got to be the right price for me.
Well, maybe if you end up with Quentin Johnson, maybe we can do a stack swap.
There we go. See, that's something to consider, Johnny. We might have to discuss.
Although I don't know if I'm projecting Quentin Johnson to be Devontae Smith, but we'll see.
Different players, totally different, touchdown dependent.
Archetypes,
yeah. You know. Yeah.
All right, so we've talked about kind of 2023 season, what you expect for your team, what you're trying to accomplish. We got the expanded teams up to 10 now, so we're looking at 6 make the playoffs. Who do you have earning those top 2 playoff spots and getting the first round bye in the playoffs?
I'm not going to lie to you. I have changed my answer since we've been doing these interviews to this question. I put myself at the top. I just feel confident. John, I'm putting you at number 2. Okay. I think you and I will be the top 2 regular season finishers from this year. I just think your team looks so deep. It's so strong where you need it to be strong. And I think you've got such upside with the players that you need to perform. But, you know, thinking that Trevor Lawrence is going to take a step forward is not that much of a stretch. He's shown all the signs that he can do it. And Justin Herbert looks like an absolute stud, and they've done nothing but build around him and give him the weapons he needs. So, you know, those 2 guys are going to take big leaps, and I think it's going to carry you to the top.
I love it. Yeah, I think it's interesting to hear like the quarterback room is often where we go when we have confidence in teams' performance. You know, not that other teams don't have good quarterbacks, but I think, you know, it's nice having the young, talented quarterbacks. And what about the rest of the playoffs, rounding out the other 4, and any hot takes on the 2023 season that get mixed into that playoff prediction?
Yeah, so I'm staying with what everyone else is saying, just as far as our tier of playoff teams. I've got you and I, John. I've got Tim, you in there, Ryan, Kyle, and I'll go ahead and say Travis as well. I think just as it stands this year, I think those teams are looking pretty sharp at the top. And truly, I think any one of them. I think there's probably, yeah, I would say there's 4, 5 that truly are championship contenders at this point that I would not be shocked with. Travis probably has to make a move or two to really jump into that contender for me. But he's strongly in that playoff tier. So that's it in no particular order. Winning it all, I'm picking myself. I don't know if I already said that, but yeah, I'm going with myself as far as winning it all. I just know that I'll be willing to make the moves that are necessary to carry myself. So again, barring any unforeseen circumstances, I like my chances. My hot spicy take, and I've had a hard time with this one as well, just because I've been burned so many times on all my hot takes, the commissioner curse and everything. Like it's not, my predictions never come to fruition. But my spicy take for this year, and I think it's going to be a pretty spicy one, but Tim is going to finish outside the top 4 in regular season standings. And I think the odds of that happening are very slim. But again, I'm looking at myself, John. I really like your team. I like Ryan's team. I get a boner for all those teams that have strong wide receiver groups. I just think they carry you so well in the regular season. And I'm going to put Kyle up above, just a tier, or not a tier, but finishing above Tim in the regular season rankings. I just, his team, obviously, it hasn't gotten any worse from last year, and he ran through us all in the regular season last year. So until he proves that he can't do it, I'm going to give him his chops on that. I think Kyle's been the hot take guy this year, and I guess he kind of is in mine too, but for different reasons. But yeah, that's my take. And I think going forward for future years too, I'll repeat what Tim said as well. I think an expansion manager next year really takes a leap. Both of those guys are going to get some good quarterbacks this year through the draft. And then next year, whoever is lucky enough to get Caleb Williams is going to be sitting pretty with 2 young studs at their quarterback position, not having to worry about, paying up to get anybody on their team. I think that's going to set them up nicely. But then also looking at Marvin Harrison Jr. next year, I mean, he's looking like the next Jamar Chase. He looks insanely good. So, that's a nice consolation prize. If not the first overall pick, I mean, who knows? But whoever gets him is going to definitely feel good about their chances moving forward. So, if those expansion guys, follow in the tanking footsteps, I think they're going to be well suited to make a move going into next season.
I appreciate your fire controversial take of me finishing out top 4. If that's the case, I'll make sure I get seeded into wherever your first week of the playoffs lands, so that I make sure I have a direct impact on you not making the championship game.
Hey man, if you're gonna be the champ, you got to beat the champ. So I'm fine with that. I'm good with it.
Any toilet bowl predictions, Brandon?
Toilet bowl. I think Sergey's going to find his way into it again, although he doesn't own his first round pick. So, it doesn't behoove him to, lose out. But I think, he's trying to follow in that tanking footsteps, and I give him props for that. He's definitely not going to be content with middle of the ground. So I think he'll make the moves. Hopefully he gets some of his guys on his current roster that, boom for him, that he can either build around or trade for some good assets. But yeah, that's my prediction. He's not running a beer mile in under 4 minutes and 30 seconds. That's not happening. So if we're talking
what would you put him at? What would you put the over under at for Sergey? You probably know him the best.
10 minutes.
10 minutes would be good. I was thinking like 12. I'd be impressed
with that. Yeah, 12 might be good, but 12 is
under 12 would be pretty damn good. Oh, are we gonna start a betting line on this?
I think we need to. Yeah, moving money line or something. But he's going to struggle. That 3rd and 4th beer are going to be real hard for him. I know he's not currently drinking, but he will. We'll make sure of that. And yeah, he's going to have a hard time circling the track on that last side. It's going to be humid too. He's not used to the humidity.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can place prop bets if he's going to throw up or not. I think this could be a whole thing.
We are degenerates. So this is going the right direction.
Absolutely.
Brandon, thank you for all your takes. And I think it was first time hearing from you directly on like how your thought, even from 2022 to now, even the midseason last season, has sort of, transpired and evolved, and your expectations for this year, your thoughts on the league as a whole. What are some of the things that you want to sort of share for the rest of the league, or things that would be, selfishly beneficial for you to just let the rest of the league know?
I mean, selfishly, I'm coming for all of you. It's going to be, every win I get this year, you better expect a celebration, especially in the beginning, because last year was rough. So, don't think I forgot about all the chirping I heard about, my contender window being 2025 and all this nonsense. We knew we'd be here in Bills Mafia. We knew where we'd be sitting. So we truly followed the blueprint and got to where we're at. So we're feeling good about that here. It's my advertisement. I'm always open for business. Everybody knows that. If you got anyone you're wanting to sell or wanting to buy, knock on my door. We'll work something out. We usually do. So that's about it. Looking for wide receivers. You know me. Give me the young guys. I still want more picks. I'm like you, Tim. It's like crack. I need them. I need them when I scroll to the bottom of Sleeper. I need to see my picks. So, if anyone wants third round picks, I have almost all of them for next year. So come at me if they're pretty cheap right now. That's about it.
Well, Brandon, appreciate your time. Enjoyed chatting with you. As the reigning champion, I am scared of your team's evolution, and the growth. I think you're going to be extremely, successful this year. And I think this whole season is going to get really, really spicy just for all the actions that you've made over the last 12 months and what that means for this season that's upcoming. Looking forward to seeing you in a few weeks. And that does it for us with Brandon and John. Thank you for hosting this as a guest. And we'll sign off here.